Okay.
Mr. President, I do
yes,
have one more
you're-
item on federal, which will be
Right.
brief, but you did get a copy of the January federal update. As you know, in reading the newspapers and monitoring the press, there's been a lot of activity in Washington, D.C. and Congress. And just before the new year, the president did sign into law the omnibus bill, which funds federal government. Included in that major bill, of course, were some changes to programs that are very important to us, namely the Pell Grant program. So I wanted to just highlight some of the changes that are happening at the federal level and what we might want to look at as we proceed in working with our congressional members in this upcoming congressional session. So the Congress did make some significant changes to the eligibility requirements to the Pell Grant program. They did not change the maximum amount level that a student with full need is eligible to receive, the $5,500. That remained intact. But as you know, Pell Grant has had a shortfall in funding for a number of years, so there have been a number of interests to try, instead of funding it to the level required, reducing the pool of Pell Grant eligible students. So what they did make some significant changes that do have an impact on California community college students. And just so you know, the Pell Grant is a very significant financial aid program for our students. Nearly 500,000 community college students currently get a Pell Grant award, and this brings in resources totaling about $1.6 billion to the state through Pell Grant. So it's a very substantial financial aid program for our students, and it has increased in recent years, largely because of the economy and the growing need of students to afford college. So the changes that were made is no longer a student who does not have a high school diploma or only has a GED would no longer be eligible for a Pell Grant award. This is a significant departure because we've always said anyone who, regardless of what your situation was in high school, you have a second chance to come to community college, you no longer will be eligible for a Pell Grant. So we think that this will affect approximately 19,000 students in our community college system, and that'll reduce the resources to the state by about $60 million. So that's a fairly significant change, but more than anything, it sends a signal to students that Pell Grants are no longer available for their second chance. The second change is that there's a reduction in the length of time you can get a Pell Grant. It reduces the time from 9 years to 6 years, and it breaks it out by semesters as well. And this will go into effect this July for students who are, and we think in California, there are about 11,000 students who might be affected by this change. The third area is it has reduced the expected family income contribution that a family must have from $30,000 to $23,000, and basically this is the income level that determines that you have full eligibility to the maximum Pell Grant. So they've really reduced the income level threshold, and that will have an impact on our students. And then lastly, they made some changes in the past. If you had 10% need, you'd be eligible for a Pell Grant. Now that's been changed, that you'd have to have a greater amount of need than that to get any kind of Pell Grant funding. And I think, this is part of a larger set of discussions going on in Congress, trying to find ways in which to reduce cuts and reduce the shortfall that we've experienced in the federal Pell Grant program. So it's something that as we move into the next congressional session, we're going to be paying close attention, working with our partners at the ACCT in monitoring Pell Grant investments. We're also going to be, because even though the shortfall actually has been eliminated by these changes in eligibility, we expect the shortfall will return in years and 1 year out. So we're going to want to ensure that they not further reduce the eligibility. The second area that we're going to look at is reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act. That's expected to be up for consideration this upcoming year. And then the last area that we'll be monitoring carefully is, as you know, the super committee was not able to, congressional committee was not able to identify the set of cuts that were needed to meet the requirements of that committee. So instead, what's happened is there's going to be a 7.2% across the board cut that will be implemented in the 2013-14 year. So there's going to be a lot of discussion about how those cuts will be implemented. And what's different about this is that across the board cut will affect the discretionary funding, which of course includes education, but it's also going to affect defense funding. So this is a very different approach to trying to reduce the budget deficit at the congressional level, and something that you'll be reading about in the next year, but it will be part of driving the discussions about funding for Pell Grants and other education programs that we depend on for our students. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's
Member McDougall.
my report.
Not a question, but a comment. It's tremendously disturbing to see an administration that has made such strong advocacy toward increasing college graduation rates throughout the nation, diminishing the support that's going to be available for students. These changes in the Pell Grant are not subtle. They're pretty strong, reducing the eligibility from 30,000 to 23,000 when obviously the cost of living continues to go up is very, very difficult to understand. It's already at almost zero for a typical family. Now it's going down to 23,000. The other ones all tighten up the aid that's available and the duration for which it is available. And certainly as a member of this board, recognizing the system that we serve, I just want to express strong disappointment at what is happening in this area, number one. And number two, that I think it is particularly incumbent upon the leadership of the Chancellor's office to work with local financial aid offices in trying to ensure that students are aware of the ramifications of these changes in the Pell Grants. They're pretty substantial. And it's, again, disappointing to see it take place, but I think more than anything, we want to try to ensure that students do understand it so they can be in a position to respond to it and plan appropriately for their education.
Point taken, Member McDougall. I know that when the Chancellor and I and the Vice Chancellor go back to Washington, we most probably will be visiting with those in charge of that program, Department of Education, and hope to bring back some further information for you. Anything else, Vice Chancellor? Any other comments or questions from the members of the board? Thank you for your report. Members, we're going to take about a 10-minute break now, and the reason is we've got to get the projectors and stuff going for our next presentation. Again, I would like us to conclude by noon today, so I want to keep this moving as efficiently as possible. So, 10-minute break.